few quick reflections from me on this day and this place. Back in 1873, the New York Times published an editorial about the relatively new theory of evolution. It was not laudatory. The Times said that if theories of Darwin, quote, were confined to the walls of the universities or the pages of scientific reviews, it would not matter so much, because the audiences would be small and discriminating. However, the editorial continued, exposing Darwin to a wider audience is a serious danger to society, especially for young and immature minds. Why is that? This was the conjecture of the Times editorialist, because scientists would, quote, coolly rule the supernatural quite out of the universe with their dictum, prove it. Basically, the editorial worried that science would cause people to hold religion up to a standard of proof and find it wanting. If only it were that easy. As we know, the supernatural and belief in it, is alive and well. Exposure to Darwin's dangerous idea and the notion that proof is essential to understanding the natural world was not the death knell to God beliefs, as the Times predicted. Far from it. 150 years after that editorial, America remains an intensely religious country. So I guess the question for us is, why? Why is that? Why are we still fighting to have evolution taught in America's schools? Why is it that in states like North Dakota and West Virginia, legislation almost passed that would have forced the teaching of intelligent design in public school science classrooms? Why are states like Louisiana and Texas ordering classrooms from kindergarten on to conspicuously display the 10 Commandments, as if it would make a discernible difference in student behavior, when any metric you can name suggests otherwise? I mean, if you look at America's prison population, who is disproportionately represented? True believing Christians. And who is rarely to be found? The atheists. And we don't steal or murder not because of a Bronze Age stone tablet, but because of humanist values and respect for the rule of law. But this stark reality that you don't need a God to be good, like the stark reality that you don't need a God to explain the natural world and all the life within it, are truths that too many Americans don't want to hear. To paraphrase Jack Nicholson and A Few Good Men, Americans can't handle the truth. And so here we are in Dayton, Tennessee, where the Rhea County Courthouse just recently posted its own 10 Commandments in a loud proclamation that in this house, we believe in a jealous God over secular justice. And the truth, what about the truth? What about the stark realities that anyone with a mind open to reason can see? Well, that read your Bible, that's theirs. This is ours. So it may just take 100 more years to sink in. But I want to leave you with something positive, hopeful. Just think about this. Homo sapiens have been around for 200,000, 300,000 tops years. We've had civilizations in ancient Mesopotamia 6,000 years ago. But even through Greek and Roman civilization, the Middle Ages, and the Renaissance, human outcomes barely budged. It wasn't until the rise of the Enlightenment and its accompanying values of reason, science, and humanism that mankind's progress went into overdrive. By using critical thinking, evidence-based analysis, and the scientific method to guide our thinking rather than received wisdom and divine revelations, humans launched themselves on a trajectory of advancement that is still transforming lives for the better in jaw-dropping ways. Our minds and bodies are better fed, our communities are safer from violence, we are better educated, less suspicious of difference in others. Technology has brought us electrification, safe drinking water, climate-controlled environments. We'd like one of those today, I'm sure. Medical science and sanitation have doubled our lifespans and prevented hundreds of millions of children from dying young. The Scopes trial pitted the forces of scientific truth against scientific ignorance. And our legacy, the legacy of the secular movement, is a continuation of that battle. And even if there are setbacks on the horizon, we will be victorious. The truth will win out. Your values, my values, will withstand what is to come and be stronger for it. So if you pardon the expression, keep the faith. There are better days ahead. Thank you.
I'm Dan Barker. I'm co-president with Annie Laurie Gaylor of the Freedom from Religion Foundation. And it's an honor on behalf of the members of FFRF and of CFI, because I think we share so many members in common under this cause, to be able to say a couple of words about this very important occasion. Some of you know I used to be a fundamentalist evangelical preacher. Don't worry, I don't have a sermon today. Do you know the word reverend was a typo? Did you know that? The first letter used to be an N. I was here more than 20 years ago when FFRF sued Ray County over the Bryan College teaching Bible classes during school days, and we won that case, and we even won on an appeal. I remember being here, and we spoke with one of the actors in last night's play, in John's play, and he was actually born and raised here. He remembers that case and the impact that it had. So this might have been ground zero for that fight over evolution and faith, but it's still ground zero for the current social conflict that we are having right now. So 100 years ago, summer of 1925, was the summer that my dad was born. 30 years later, I started in the California public schools, and for that entire education, through those whole 12 years, I don't remember hearing the word evolution once. Maybe I missed a class, I don't know, but I was a street preaching fundamentalist type. I carried my Bible to school. I was telling everybody, this is the solid truth. Read your Bible. And I went to a Christian college, and I guess I heard the word evolution. I guess, of course, how can you not hear it? But I knew it was wrong. I didn't know what it was, but it's not in the Bible. And humans were created just directly from God. So I didn't know what it was, but I knew it was bad. And so in my ministry, as I got ordained and I was preaching, I would sometimes mention the ignorant opinions of these scientists who think they know better than God how the world really works. And it wasn't until I was about 30 where some gears started spinning, and maybe you've read in my book, Godless, about that process of deconverting, that I thought, I'm preaching against this thing. I keep preaching against this evolution, it's horrible. I didn't really know what it was. I'm kind of embarrassed to admit I had this really stupid idea of what it was. I thought scientists were saying that evolution is some kind of an internal, progressive, teleological force that's pushing each generation to improve into the next one. How stupid is that? Well, if that's what scientists are saying, that is indeed stupid, because that's not what evolution is. I had this uninformed evangelical idea that evolution was one of these, maybe even a satanic idea, a devilish idea. I thought evolution was an additive thing. I didn't realize until I started reading, evolution is not additive. Natural selection is subtractive. It's taking away rather than building up. And I remember when I started reading, I thought, I'm preaching against evolution and against humanism. I should probably learn a little bit about it. So I started reading some books, thinking, so this is what the scientists say. So that's what they're saying. So that's what they're saying? Wow, that's cool. I didn't know that. oh, that's interesting. And later I read The Selfish Gene, which, by the way, if you read The Selfish Genes, there's a couple of paragraphs that are criticizing the Bible. Dawkins, even back then, couldn't resist putting a couple of jabs in about the Bible. But it dawned on me, boy, I was ignorant. And isn't it amazing that the less you know about something, the more confident you are? That's what preachers are like. We're up there preaching the God. We know. They don't know what they're talking about, but they're super confident. And the more you learn about something, the less confident you become, the more humble you become, the more open to being wrong, the more open to changing your opinions. And that was part of my deconversion process. I used to have the gift of prophecy. I don't know if I can still bring it out again. And the gift of healing. But I'm going to make a prophecy. And if I'm wrong, you can dig me up and tell me. 100 years from now, there will be some other people, probably most of them never born, standing in this spot for the 200th anniversary, the bicentennial of the Scopes trial. And even though 100 years ago it was ground zero, I'm going to prophesy that 100 years from now, the controversy will be pretty much zero. The acceptance of the truth of evolution will prevail. Why? Because it's the truth. Thank you.
Is it hot enough for you? Imagine what it was like 100 years ago. You can at least get air conditioning on a bus. People who are coming here just came to see the spectacle, the show, and as one Dayton resident said, get a college education for nothing. I was told to speak quickly, just for a couple of minutes, extemporaneously, so I didn't prepare anything. But there are a couple of things I do want to say. First of all, thanks very much to Robyn and Annie and Dan and both centers that they represent for organizing such a wonderful conference. Second of all, I don't know, I'm assuming that you heard the brilliant conversation between Richard Dawkins and John McWhorter this morning, and that brings me to the remarks that I want to make today, because their focus was on language, and that brings me to Clarence Darrow. And in many ways I see Richard and John as the inheritors of what Darrow was so ably and wonderfully to do here 100 years ago and in so many other places. So it's a great honor to be right underneath his statue today in this particular heat. Because what he was able to do eloquently, brilliantly, was to use the forensic language of the law at the same time that he combined it with everyday speech that jurors who would have thought they were dead set against him or evolution or for Brian came around to see in a very different way. If any of you had the opportunity to read a wonderful piece today in the New York Times by John McWhorter on language and on Ketanji Brown, which was very interesting in relation to actually Clarence Darrow, because Clarence Darrow really inherited in some ways language, the ability to use language in the same way as Thomas Henry Huxley, who was the first bulldog of Darwin, as he was called in the 1880s, and actually came on a speaking tour to the United States and filled stadiums. Those were the days. But he made science available to everyone in a way that did not dilute science, but brought people in. He's also the person who coined the term agnostic. So from that point, Huxley, speaking for Darwin, who was shy, to Darrow, to us, to Richard, to John, to all of you, we in a sense carry that legacy forward. So much of what we heard yesterday and what we've been hearing is how do we take the insights of science, but of other things as well, that we kind of put under the rubric of reason and take them to the larger population, which Darrow was able to do, which is no wonder some people in the ACLU didn't want him on the podium. He used language in a very different way. And he studied science. There was many things that he studied, and he was able to distill that which was important to people and transmit it. So as I said, I'm very honored to be here, to be with all of you, to be part of this conference, to be in front of this courthouse, which is so storied in so many ways and will come to symbolize not so much as read your Bible, but read your Darwin. And I say to you, with the words of Darrow, who said, "I cannot be free unless you are free." Thank you.
There's an origin story, and the origin story is this. I read a book about Clarence Darrow, and I knew there was a statue here of William Jennings Bryan, and I felt that it was kind of violation of the Constitution, church and state separation, and I knew this wasn't going to get removed, even though this isn't private land. So I thought the way to kind of redefine what it was all about, the narrative, was if I could get a Clarence Darrow statue here, then it becomes historical, which is actually closer to the truth. That's what it is. It's something that happened that was historical. Of course, there's philosophy and there's science behind it. So that was just coming up with ideas, one thing. Then Rosalie, who was my wife at divorced now, but she's still my business partner. She had to call the town. She talked to the mayor and said, "We have this idea. Would you like to have this statue if we can arrange it?" And he liked the idea, and he said, "Talk to the Historical Society," which I think was here. And he said, "Talk to Tom Davis," who was wonderful about making arrangements and had me talk to many people, including a high school teacher who talked to his students, and they were all excited. And it was interesting. And there were some people who didn't like it. There was a preacher woman who threatened to shoot me, and there's a picture of her with a shotgun on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. But so Rosalie called the Tennessee Pastors Association, and they went over and they had a talk with her, and they told her, "Don't go there, don't take your shotgun, don't take a look." So that was good. And it was amazing how actually cooperative and how reasonable many of the people were who actually were church people, but they weren't the extremists. They didn't believe necessarily in a literal interpretation, or they liked the idea of history. That's what this is. This is what this is all about. Margaret Downey, who's sitting here, I talked with her, and I asked her, "How do you think we can make this happen? Now we have to finance it." And she said, "You need to meet someone at FFRF, and you need the people who run it, and Annie Laurie, and she has a connection here, which you just heard about." And she was very wonderful about financing this. So then we had the city wanted it. It almost fell through a few times, but we stayed with it. And we had the financing. And what I wanted to do, they told me there were a few rules. They didn't want to overpower this. This is 10 feet high with the base. So this is 10 feet high, but I made a smaller pedestal so I could make the sculpture a little bigger. Because a life-size statue, which I think that is, doesn't look big outside because the air eats it up, the space eats it up. So usually I do 7 to 10 foot statues. I just did one of another fighter, Muhammad Ali, that's 10 feet in Lewiston, Maine. But it's, so it's actually, I mean, it could have been a little larger, but I think it's a good size. And I have him pointing over there towards him, sort of, you see it? And he's snapping his suspender because he would make a point and he would snap that suspender. And they look like he slept in his suit, which I almost did just so I'd look appropriate, but I didn't. And he it was very characteristic, I wanted to get a likeness of him, to have his hair down on his forehead. But this one time, when he came here, it was so hot, like today, that he went to see the local barber and said, "Cut it." So you can see it's not very, very far down on his forehead like it was. So it's actually more accurate. I mean, it's not important. It's important not just to have the likeness. You got to have the right clothes, the right period for all of it, and the hair and all of that. So anyway, so that's what I wanted to do. You see, it's the same distance from the courthouse, and I think that there was one more thing. So I wanted it to look like it had always been here, so I gave it a green patina, so it looked like it'd been here and it patinaed over time like this one. So it looked like it belonged. And Rosalie said she was here one day, and as we finished, we had just put it up, and people had left, and a woman with a dog came by. She was walking her dog, and she went over to Rosie. She said, "Was that there yesterday? I don't remember that sculpture." So I felt like we succeeded.
So I get the graveyard slot at the end. The monkey trial. That gives the game away. In Tennessee in 1925, as in Victorian England, Darwinism meant monkeys. It's a mean, poky little restriction of a magnificent idea. According to Dan Dennett, the greatest idea anyone ever had. Darwin explained how the unaided laws of physics and chemistry can build from primeval simplicity gigantic monuments of complexity and elegance of design, including cicadas, by the way. When Clarence Darrow dramatically called William Jennings Bryan to the witness stand, he cross-examined him on biblical absurdities such as God causing the sun to stand still in the sky, postponing sunset to give Joshua more time to massacre the Amorites. To Bryan's embarrassment, Darrow pointed out the apocalyptic consequences of Earth stopping dead in its rotation, which is what halting the sun in the sky would amount to. He could as well have drawn attention to the undignified absurdity of the creator of the universe stooping to engineer a cosmic catastrophe for the sake of anything so squalidly parochial as extra time for a skirmish between two human desert tribes. Or we could have switched from the Bible to science and challenged Bryan with this. When the animals streamed down the gangplank of Noah's Ark on Mount Ararat, why did the marsupials so single-mindedly troop off to Australia? Darwin's theory in its modern form is a triumph of explanatory power. You start from microscopic simplicity, and 4 billion years later, you have a coast redwood and a blue whale. You have the delicate beauty of a dragonfly or a spider web. You have folds of grey matter capable of writing Principia Mathematica, Hamlet, General Relativity, the Eroica Symphony. Darwin's idea is a soaring cathedral of an idea, a towering edifice buttressed on all sides by supporting facts in their millions. Evidence from geology, geographic distribution, taxonomy, paleontology, biochemistry, comparative morphology, embryology, nowadays above all by the digital trump card of DNA and protein sequencing. But in this courthouse in 1925, scientific evidence was largely deemed inadmissible. All the magnificence of science was reduced to the human parochialism of the monkey trial. Behold the vanity of human exceptionalism, vanity of vanities, the human vanity that Darwin himself fought. William Jennings Bryan was quite explicit about it. The only part of evolution in which any considerable interest is felt is evolution applied to man. A hypothesis in regard to the rocks and plant life does not affect the philosophy upon which one's life is built. Evolution applied to fish, birds, and beasts would not materially affect man's view of his own responsibilities. The same vanity of human exceptionalism pervades the culture wars that bedevil our discourse today, infighting with the Judean Popular Front when we should be targeting the Romans. Human exceptionalism is so petty, so blinkered, so lacking in the grand vision that Darwin promised, so blind to the fulfillment of that promise, which modern biology is daily achieving.